The hip-hop writer is a creator, composing understanding words of culture brilliance, powering a rebalance of the elements equally. Pages of rejuvenated reaffirmation, simply the almighty leadership of insightful craft work that stands to build through any confrontation born to be. Yet, his daily duty is as a journalist that questions properly, uses his ears for the good to filter the real, and as the art decays by dilution, he concentrates the best again and again, exposing it in the print. Today's journalist and tomorrow's historian he listens to share. Here is that necessary attempt executed again and again and again. This is the Power Right Show on S.STREET Media. This is your brother, the lone low life with the home-sewn garment, the Boricua with the build, the true and living stepping in score, SUNEZ Allah, a.k.a. Skillustrator Low. And we are on S.STREET Media, the evolution of media. Every intrigue will have its own show, every incredible thought will have its own episode, and every timeless insight will be archived. So here we are. It's been a long time, though. And you know what happens when we don't have a show for a long time, right? It produces more need to isolate ideas, and more bullshit happens. That's the truth. Let's stop talking about other shit. A lot of bullshit happens. A lot of whack shit comes out. You know what I mean? And you're tuned into something here that's started out. I'm going to go back to a quote by KRS-One. He said, "Make money elsewhere. Hip-hop, you won't abuse it." Man, probably some of the brothers in this studio is probably like, fuck that shit. We're going to make this money. But I tell you something, though. Word is bond. I have lived my entire life since hearing that quote, literally living it out like that. You know what I'm saying? I've made money in hip hop, but I've usually made it elsewhere. You know what I'm saying? And I think about that quote a lot. You know what I mean? And in this element that this show represents, the writer of art and science on music, I like to call it, right? Creative works that write on creative works and give insight, a lot deeper insight, science on music. And this show, the Power Right Show, is really the only show in history that covers this element that I'm one of the pioneers of for over 20 years. And boy, that's a long journey of making money elsewhere. Hip hop, I haven't abused it. So there was a thing, right? There was a thing that I had read recently. The father of my element said recently about this music that we have created, you know, about this music that we have created side by side with and have documented for so long. You know, he said, about the bad music, about the music that doesn't have integrity. He said, don't befriend it. Don't write about suckers who ruin it. A lot of people in here hate what's happening in our society and don't want to hear music that celebrates ignorance. Ignorance is a loaded term there, right? But I want to thank Bones Malone for saying that. I read that this morning as I come here to do the show tonight, preparing for the show that I'm calling the Appropriation Lecture. You know? And I speak in a gray area tonight because the ignorance has come from us, the listener, certainly from the media. And I don't mean the media like these big 1% people that are controlling what is being written about things. I mean us that love the music and we happen to make our way and break it to magazines, and some of us saw it as a way to do something in hip hop if they didn't have skills and talents in the other four elements. But I mean the ignorance. I mean the ignorant is really us for the way that we've let go of this music. And it counts first, though, to say where you're from. I'm going to start this, though, because I got to start it with something that says where I'm from, so you get where this entire appropriation lecture is coming from. I wrote this piece recently for my brother's Undeniable, so I called this piece undeniable like Seven in Sin. Brooklyn, 1988, Sunset Park. In the lettered lung of Medina, booked into the spell of Sasson Sunfalls, that some of the mighty Mets failed, and the robbery of the finest fabrics forged the medallion. Brownsville had the L's, and the heart of Medina had the universals. They had the universals. And skill is straight here, donde todos son boricua, where chancletas fly and coquis come to die. Quietly learning the letters that make word bond. Understanding cipher years later. That's 3-0 if you're doing the knowledge. Crest and crowns honor the God's love and loyalty wardrobe. A life of martial treasures. School and lectures using swords. Not the lies that vex. And pub and break beat scoops with those same sacred words. All another element for Sedgwick. You ever wonder about that fight? I tell you, brother, it's been undeniable. It's been undeniable. It's been undeniable as I bring you now this appropriation lecture based off the rule 1080. 1080 because you should have learned it way before 4080. You should have learned it before you learned that record company people were shady. Because certain rappers and now certain media are shady. You should have learned it when you saw the music of your forefathers. You should have seen it though when they first decided to record a horn blasting from New Orleans. You should have heard it when they first decided to record a conga out in the South Bronx, out in Ponce, right? A nice rumba, whether it was in Cuba or in Jamaica. You should have thought about that rule number 1080 when we had all our arts that were diluted, that were disrespected, that were co-opted. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the appropriation lecture, 1080. That's based on the rule. I call it, it's really an extended version of the media mutations I had planned for a while about Eminem, about the whitewash, and the historical insight that goes along with that. You know what I mean? Because you know what's funny, right? You would think that after all these years, people just don't want to hear silly shit on a mic. But that hasn't been the case. And the reason there's a reason that certain music is empowered, is emboldened, and extends itself. And I'm gonna go through some of the reasons why. But when we talk about appropriation, the word appropriation literally means, though, that people are using the techniques of others, of a people, and using the best, what they see is the legitimate part of a people's culture, a way of living, a way of creating, and co-opting and using it without respecting, paying homage, or even doing the art that they are appropriating in a spirit that honors those who created it. So often the product is in complete opposite direction and intention of where they got those techniques and styles from. Better put it, this is the history of black peoples in the world. This is the history of the northern side of the hemisphere, specifically the United States, where this is the most recorded music in the world. The music of the original people here. Whether it be by horns, trumpets, congas, mass percussion, whether it be words, whether it be ideas, anything musically, anything in a rhythmic function. So we begin like this, right? I mentioned Eminem specifically because he's really the pivotal key player here. If you're keeping your Terminator 2 scorecards, you know, he might be Miles Tyson, you know, Miles Dyson, you know what I mean? He might be the one, though, that you got to go back in time, though, and get rid of if you want this whole thing to not happen. You know what I mean? If we don't want artificial music to take over, you know. And I know that this lecture here, though, will it's gonna end up complexifying what we spent a long time making simple. And for that, though, I give no apologies for. But this whole thing, when we talk about Eminem, the whitewash, the entire whitewash, though, of hip-hop music and culture, specifically the music, it's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm where the gravitation of our complacency, our pop desires that turn a counterculture to a subculture, and our generally deteriorated sense of musicality are all nearly gone. You know what I mean? We could talk about and we're going to talk about these things in a minute, though. But I want to talk about the last one specifically first. The deterioration of our musical palette. The reason hip-hop was, one of the reasons hip-hop is so powerful, and I'm going to get into these specific bullet points, but I know it's something I didn't write, so I just want to go off the cuff here and wing this aspect. One of the reasons hip-hop was so powerful is because our music, black music, specifically recorded here in the United States, takes a turn, and our people don't have the tradition of music makers passing down a knowledge of music instrument playing. So the first people that use instruments of this deterioration are playing music without any kind of formal schooling. And we can see that throughout the world, right? There's a lot of Latin genres that will work this way. If we go to other places, it doesn't have to be America, but if we go to Dominican Republic, we see that in bachata, right? Bachata is based on arpeggios and the mix, and basically a different form of bolero based on broken arpeggios, right? So every time you hear bachata, it's going ding 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 ding, and it's just ding 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 fucking forever, right? The shit that we love about that is the addiction of it, but it's also based on a root of them not really knowing how to play as immaculately and as complex as, let's say, the bolero makers, and bolero means ballad, the bolero makers of Mexico and, of course, and also Cuba. But you have it also here in the U.S., though. We have the first urban genre of music in New York City developed, and we have salsa, which is basically a specific, I'm going to use the word subgenre, not to disrespect it, just to give it a visual, that comes off of Cuban son, which is which has a specific formula. And the jazz ethos of improvisation, right? The jazz ethos of improvisation and the lack of playing and the lyrical brashness and rebelliousness all merged together to make salsa what it is. People like Willie Colon, Eddie Palmieri and their bands, featuring people like Hector Lavoe. Then you have other people like Cheo Feliciano, Ismael Quintana, Adalberto Santiago. I'm just trying to name favorites here. Pick up the legends in the collection. But a whole host of people, all those finding all-stars, whatever we want to talk about here and beyond, right? Because people like Ismael Rivera, they're the GOAT level, GOAT candidates, and they weren't finding all-stars because unlike what you look at now, Fania was a specific label. It wasn't, it didn't buy everything out until later. But anyway, this whole idea of the music made, the first urban genre made in New York City, salsa, when it's made, what happens is that you see people that don't know how to play music, and now they're creating out of that. They're creating music even though they didn't really know how to play, right? So we see a lot of sloppiness, though. You see a lot of problems between the earlier generations, right? We could look up things like the Tito Puente verse Willie Colon and what he used to say about it, how he was very against the word salsa, right? Because those are commercial terms used to identify it. Just like, as a note, just like the word jazz, or even in many ways, what was thought, though, by some that argue the word hip-hop itself, right? But when we look at things like that, when I talk about a perfect storm, I say, why? You know, why? When I talk about those three things, about our complacency, what do we mean by that? The pop desires we have of turning a counterculture into a subculture that becomes a pop culture. And we talk about the lack of our musicality, right? And I'm going to say something a little bit heavy now, right? This is where the rewind buttons will come in later. And I'm going to say why, for me, why this appropriation is such an important issue. In all of my career as a hip-hop writer in this element is as a creator learning of himself, myself, and making creations that further my own learning. Hip-hop was that forum not merely to create, but also to learn of myself as the creator. So as a creator, the true and living God with knowledge of self as I see it, where actual science and logic are used to propel the deepest spiritual questions to see myself as supreme and also responsible to this world that I have created. Then and only then, I see all things in honoring the creators, that is, honoring our greatest question, what if? I'll say that again. That question of the creator is what if? And so much of my covering hip-hop is in offering the ideal, revealing the potential peak as the place to be, not merely an allowed success. The allowed success of how far we could successfully cross over. Whether we might be billionaires and someday we might be billionaires and all of that. These are allowances. These are not limitless peaks of our creation. They're not based even in what if most of the time. So, as a side note, remember that when I talk about our people, and I'll probably have to repeat this again because we're talking about appropriation and we're really talking about whites stealing the culture of those who they oppress. And when we're talking about that, a lot of times the real core word here is privilege, white privilege. And what we're talking about, though, is not the same as lighter skinned original people, people of the black, brown, and yellow shade, being treated differently by the society at large that oppresses. Those are what we call allowances. Those are not privileges. Those are allowances, right? Here's another problem with appropriation. When we talk about appropriation, why this is important is because it blocks art. It blocks the development of art. Let me explain why. First off, right, we're talking about whites, we're talking about white MCs, particularly whites that make music. It actually blocks the stories of other whites. You know, if you talk to any white MC that's really talented, that really has a sincerity for the people that the culture comes from, meaning us, black and brown people, a real sincerity for the trials and tribulations of the people that they're coming from. Because of Eminem, though, and the cliches and the stereotypes and the thematic, the downgraded thematic ideas that he's presented and forced and made the industry enjoy going into that lane, the majority of great MCs that are white that have deeper stories to tell about their plight, they're not going to be able to say it. They won't be able to say it unless they conform to some kind of downgrading on that level, some type of clicheing of themselves. You know what I mean? And we could see it, and I can name a lot of people. You know what I mean? I'm thinking of people like Wooden Chains, a white brother that comes from Indiana that talks about working in the factories out there, whose stories are totally different than the chronology that Eminem has been given, right? And birthed a whole generation of pill poppers, birthed a whole generation, though, of drug use on a higher level, and also really dumbed down the idea of the battle bar, you know? And these are my ideas. I would say this too on another note. The reason this is important, though, is because it de-emphasizes soul. In other words, we're de-emphasizing our great artists when we canonize someone else, though, that hasn't really gotten there, and that's a level of privilege. So when we de-emphasize soul, what I mean is this: we de-emphasize soul that is actually merged with deeper content and complex dexterity. And a perfect example of that is Pharoah Monch, right? A deeper content merged with a complex dexterity that we have not heard. And he continues to do that album and album, and is a, to me, is a near absolute GOAT candidate. But we don't see that. You know what I mean? Or the comedic personas that have been replaced, though, but the comedic personas of our people that have hit peaks, though, right? As in Redman. You know, I find it funny that we crave an appropriated version of our music when people like Redman exist. When people like Pharoah Monch exist in those lanes. When people like Kool G Rap have existed and continue to exist. Right? And if you're really digging deeper, as I alluded to, there are plenty of white MCs that have such profound content, from Subtext to Wooden Chains to Zagnif Nori, that have a profound level of insight from their experiences, right? But let's continue on, right? When we talk about hip-hop, the reason this is not up for this, the reason this is something that is left by the wayside and allowed, is because when we look at hip-hop, we're not defining it properly when we think about it. Hip-hop is the first musical counterculture created by a diverse black diaspora. That is black and brown from all over the Americas, from the U.S., these United States, to the English and Spanish Caribbean. That's never been done before. There's no recorded music, and certainly not a recorded music on the mass scale, that merges the ideas, the evolved musical ideas from a diverse group of black diaspora. You're not going to get it anywhere else. There is an absolute white privilege that I intend to prove here, and begin here tonight, though, that I've seen in my 20 plus years of journalism, that has overrated Eminem, that has overrated his skill sets, and dismissed his content, that has diluted hip-hop's cultural focus as supposedly unique. You see, there's a difference, right? When we see the disses about Lord Jamal and things like that, because Lord Jamal, just as Rakim Allah, didn't bring the 5% Nation of Gods and Earth's culture to hip-hop. Rather, he, that is Jamar, Rakim, even myself, we revealed it in our works. A culture that is essential to the understanding the roots of this black music of ours. In other words, the roots of this hip-hop music and culture go back to other types of culture that we don't even know about, that we have lost touch with. Today's hip-hop music and culture, you can say you live it real, you listen to it real, and you don't even know about anything that went on that produced the reality that fomented the culture forming. So you don't know about the gods and earths that were teaching all over Pelon, the Bronx. You don't know about their reality in Harlem. You don't know about how these musics coincide and interject, and there's a history behind it. And again, that's why sampling was such a core to the music, because this person that sampled and the person that witnessed the music and dug for the sample to understand the song better was also digging back into a history. You know what I mean? A history that goes way back. You know what I mean? This is also what people like Bambaataa and people like Kool Herc were really exposing when they were making Digging in the Crates a specific culture. You know what I mean? It was also a way for us to dig back into history, to know about the history. But now let's continue. I'm going to say this, though. No one shows the worthlessness of soulless, content deaf, impaired technical skill in the arts than the popularly heralded, media misacclaimed white gentrifying champion. And it's a problem. It's a problem because Eminem, someone who has only shown himself to be a lover of black music, and allied to black men that engage in the arts under a diluted camaraderie of shared technical sensibilities, but nothing else. Hey, you spit, I spit. You spit about bars, I spit about bars. We don't say shit. We destroy imaginary people. It's fucking imaginary people. And now there's a camaraderie because you go up on stage, though, and you try to have the best punchlines. So the camaraderie is based on men that perform punchlines. A bunch of barren, wasteful poets hitting stages, though, and hoping that they are hard enough to secure an audience, though. Have I fucking ruined hip-hop for you yet? Because that's what it is for most of the people that love this shit. They say hip-hop is my religion, but they're listening to people that just spit fucking punchlines at each other. A bunch of jokesters that grab their crotch. That's all we have. And then go through why. And when we look at Eminem, the history of his work only shows a love for those type of black men. It shows no real insight to anything else. And I'm going to say this. That's what he's shown and is what it is. But it isn't as carefree a reality when so much more of the script is not improvised and the appeal of organic occurrences is shown not so true. See, it'll always be a problem that someone does black culture. Something is hip-hop for the first time, developed, as I said, by a larger black diaspora than what was allowed, and the white artist that is gifted, not by his talents only, but by the form, another form. See, when a white artist performs, he's been gifted with a form. And that's what Lord Jamal was meaning by you're a guest in his house. You've been gifted with a form that your people did not make, and none of your people have taken the time to farm in it. And we see books like Dan Charnas's book about the history of hip-hop business, and it tries to subtly make the point that we should be happy and we should be grateful that business and the selling of the music, many of them were sincere in trying to make a buck out of this. Get the fuck out of here. Not in this show. Not in this show. Take your fucking making money shit out the door with that bullshit. They made money and they had no care about whether the art was going to be good. They only cared when the art was going to be good when it opened up a niche that was never found before. See, the thing is, though, people say good music sells, and what's good music to us is actually new niches and target markets being exposed for the seller of that work. There isn't a sincerity in that. And as a large enveloping idea, the point of hip-hop culture, just like bomba and plena in Puerto Rico, just like bachata, merengue out in Dominican Republic, just like jazz was, specifically jazz, where the artist was supposed to learn the instrument technically and then only was a jazz player until he could find his own unique way of playing. This shit was supposed to survive without it being recorded on 12-inch, 45, or LP. This shit was a lot deeper than that. It was a way of expression, and it always collides with survival because it's music, it's arts that we make as oppressed people. It's going to collide with capitalism. It's going to collide with business. But I won't sit here and herald that as an excuse and as an allowance that this ought to go on this way. So when that phrase, a guest in the house of hip hop, I don't think that Lord Jamal always describes his points in the greatest way. But he's absolutely correct with this. So fuck you. Fuck you is the point, because you get to do something that has been gifted to you. See, your people didn't grow up having a need to express themselves, or else they wouldn't express themselves. And that's another idea and theme that Eminem brings to the table. He brings a thematic content that is based on angst, which is much different than the anger of oppression. Angst is an anger that is not based on someone oppressing you. It's the anger of being in a droll life. You see? A life where you see things that could be better, but you're not quite there yet. But there isn't people stopping you. There aren't people specifically stopping you just because of who you are. It might be the lot in life that you are in, but not because of who you actually are. So I say this, right? For one that doesn't absolutely need the form and isn't studying the culture as a consequence of oppression instead of the mere surface level of study, a surface level that studies the obsession to the articles of creation, that obsesses over the final products, the beautiful rare creations that at their best are intended to weaponize the urge in the people for freedom, justice, and equality. Those who are a select chosen few. A select self-chosen few. See, a person like Eminem has a skill, and thus by those parameters deserves to try to MC, to try to rhyme. But because my form is about putting these things into context, because my form is about analyzing this, because my form is about taking an opinion that goes beyond like and dislike, but uses historical truths and insights to back up an idea with real science, that science on music I've been talking about, then it's not okay. It's not okay. You know what I mean? And the truth is, though, if we were to take Eminem away from hip-hop culture, right? If we were to Terminator 2 this bitch, right? And go back, I'll tell you something, though, there'd be somebody else. Let's continue on with these points. For the listener, right? And that includes myself, right? For the listener, black or white, I find it the epitome of white privilege, indulged or supported, to be tired of hearing all this art culture stuff, ideas and ownership, and just wanting to enjoy black arts, not knowing every single last music on this Western hemisphere, from hip-hop to salsa to reggae to jazz, is born out of oppression, and they need to create ways out of it. The reason they all fall away from saying things worthwhile is because white folk that buy or run the industry push it out. That's another fact easily proven. So what I'm saying is here is this, right? When we're talking about white privilege, though, it's a very active principle. It's an active principle in the music because historically, the music has always been something that we have either pre-sold out, pre-packaged for the audiences that we try to hit. Envision yourself in 1940s and 50s Cuba, pre-Fidel, and imagine yourself making rumba and son, and now it's time to go to the Copacabana, those Cuban clubs down there, right? And the whites that are coming there to launder their money, right? Godfather 2 type shit. And they're like, well, hey, these guys don't even know how to clave, right? They don't even know how to do that, though. So they change up the son and they call it mambo. You know what I mean? Right? You hear it though. You go mambo, and then the white people they hold each other's backs though, because they fucking fall out if they don't hold each other's backs. You know why they do it? And they conga line, and then it becomes simple because now we made a new music mambo, and it goes cha cha cha. Cha cha. Now you can cha 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 your fucking ass off, right? Easy, like ABCs. Cha cha cha, cha cha, right? Because they couldn't do the shit. Dilute the shit. Now we got niggas with ruffled shirts and they're holding the congas on like a fanny pack, like the God's fanny pack. They got the conga strapped on over the ruffled shirt. You know what I mean? Singing about who knows what. Singing about bringing a party to you. Singing about helping you to make you dance. You know that ends up becoming the majority of salsa and son. I'm here to help you learn how to dance. A music for people that already know how to dance naturally, though, they need to hear every other song. I'm here to show you how to dance. I'm here to help you dance with this music. This is the appropriation. This is what I'm talking about. And the appropriation has already taken place in hip-hop. Eminem is a figure. He's a pivotal figure. but he's not exactly how it happened. He's not exactly what was really happening in this. So what I'm saying is this, right? Culture, including hip-hop, is for all people. But a culture is created by a people to express their reality. It's horrendous when all people want to engage in the more comforting versions of a culture, whilst the originating expressors still have not come close to resolving their need for a form for their deeper issues and ever progressing ideas. So let me tell you something. Culture is for everybody. But when you say that there are no higher standards to it, you just eliminated that culture for yourself as an oppressed people as one for deeper issues or ever progressing ideas. And now those progressive ideas are some alternative shit, are now out the box. And a standard is now ridiculed as a dated sound. The classic word boom bap. When I say boom bap, I'm talking about people that are trying to originate a unique sound that is not just doing the same hihachi drums again and again. You know what I mean? And not just doing bars. I'm fucking tired of bars. You know what I mean? I'm fucking tired of the lavishness that you live, though. That you say you live, but you don't live. Man, where did I get stuck writing about a fucking music about a whole bunch of fake niggas? How did I get stuck doing that? We had to keep it real ethos, though, and I write about niggas that lie all the time. Niggas be lying. Nigga, you didn't take a jet. You didn't take a jet here. You know what I'm saying? They find a nice car and say, yo, IG this nigga. IG me on this. Bars. IG me on this. Let's do the video here. Let's do the video here. And it has its precursors. That's another show, right? You know, the show that almost got me exiled from Medina. You know what I mean? I'm from Brooklyn and I was on Beach Street. I'm a skinny Boricua kid hanging out on Beach Street and telling everybody Biggie's going to fuck up hip-hop. I should have been learning Kung Fu back then. You know what I'm saying? And that's another story, right? Because we do it to ourselves and then we allow other things in. You know what I mean? I remember, fuck it. I'm going to give this story. It's a fun tale. I remember I had a little back and forth on the Facebook years ago with Chael Coker. You might know him now as he's writing what's that show? You know, the brother that he's bulletproof and shit.
Iron Fist.
The other one,
Iron Man.
The black guy.
What's his name? I'm already forgetting that shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's no we suck here. We don't know our Marvel shit like that. You know what I mean? But Luke Cage, there you go. Right? So Luke Cage, right? He's one of the writers in Luke Cage, but he had written Biggie's biography. He wrote Biggie's biography, Chael Coker, right? And I was critical of Biggie, and that's another story, right? And I'll real quickly say, though, that I feel like the pop A, this is one thing, so that the listener, you can follow. The pop A side, hardcore B side, I said would ruin hip hop. Tell me I'm not fucking right on some of this shit. The pop A side, hardcore B side that we accept. Back then, before Biggie came out, if you came out with a song and that shit was commercial popcorn in the front and hardcore shit on the back, they were saying this shit's some sellout shit. That's a fucking fact. That's a fucking fact. And if you want to know the comparison of what the lane was like and how different that was, two albums that came out at nearly the same time, though, was Biggie's Ready to Die and M.O.P.'s To the Death. Brothers that made music from the same area. From the same area. Okay? Because Bed-Stuy and Brownsville is not like walking from... It's not Upper West Side and then all of a sudden you just went down to Times Square. Brownsville is more active Times Square, and that's the Upper West Side, Bed-Stuy. No, throw a lot more, 100% more crime and hell and poverty, and then you have there's more razzle-dazzle in Bed-Stuy, and there's more grit in Brownsville, but they both get you shot. You just get shot fancy in Bed-Stuy. You know what I mean? But here's the thing. These are some of my arguments. This is the beginning of some of my arguments. I said, look, what Diddy's doing with him is gonna fuck it up. Right? I said it would dilute things. I was right. It diluted things. You know what I mean? It diluted things, and it allowed us to say that certain things can be allowable. And it ushered in an era where things were allowable. You know what I mean? Because we were still arguing about stuff. 1994, though, we're still arguing about the quality of a sample. The quality of the chop. It's a good beat, but he just looped it. And he's weak. He's weak. He just looped it. He just used the Isley Brothers, Between the Sheets. That's easy, though. You know what I mean? If your parents fuck to that record, it's a weak record. If it's some pop shit that they got off on and they know, it's weak. Can't use it. We're still arguing about the merits of Mary J. Blige. You rhyming over samples. Isn't that like cannibalism? R&B over R&B? R&B on R&B. That's cannibalism. We're still arguing about that shit. But here's what happens, right? Here's what happens, right? Some factors on losing this ownership. Let me read you an annotation, right? Because we're going to leave Biggie alone. We're going to leave Biggie alone. That's another show, right? You know what I mean? I'm fucking in Brooklyn. You know what I mean? I get off at the wrong stop in the L, though, and I could think, oh, no, wait. This gentrified line. The gentrified line. I'm good. Fuck Brownsville. Fuck Bed-Stuy. Fuck everything. All criminals that existed, right? I could do that now because when I get on the train, it's gentrified. I get a gentrifier to take me home, though. Because I live in a gentrified area, right, around Inwood, and then I get some gentrifiers here. It's all a community. It's a diverse community. You get them all to link up, they take me right home, though. You know what I mean? But some factors on losing ownership. From an annotation, this is an annotation on Lucky You from Eminem's Kamikaze album from Genius.com. For those that don't know, Genius.com, or as I like to call it, the GLN, the Gentrifiers Learning Network, says on this song, says, in the beginning of his career, that's Eminem, not many people trusted Eminem's skills as a rapper because it was considered black culture. I said, nigga, what? It said that not many people trusted Eminem's skills because it was considered a black culture. This shit's was once considered. It's once considered a black culture. So now it could be documented now that it is no longer a black culture. That's some bullshit. That's an outright lie. The best artists that do hip hop, whatever shade you are doing black culture. Are tapping into the soul and ethos and reality of our people. And I don't care if you're black, brown, yellow, or white. I don't care if you're from the ghetto, if you're poor or not, or you come from a nice suburb. Whatever shade you are, you're doing black music. And now only in hip hop it doesn't have to be respected. But here's why. Here's one of the reasons why that happens, though, and why we find it not odd at all, is because, one, the speed of commercialization. This shit speeds up. So let me name some genres that I mentioned before. I'll use jazz. We're not going to use blues because blues is a core, but it is not really a soul core the way jazz was, right? So we use jazz. We could use salsa. Salsa is a good example because, boy, that's a deteriorated music right there. You know what I mean? That's a real deteriorated music. You know what I mean? It's just mind-blowing. We could take musicians, artists that we like, that are really, sincere or have talent, and we could show how diluted it is. That's how diluted it got. Or reggae we could use, and we certainly could use R&B to soul to hip-hop. But what I mean by the speed of commercialization is this. There's two types of speed that are necessary. Two types of speed that are necessary. You need the speed of the business. It's promotions, marketing, it's development of niche markets, and it's merging of markets. What I mean by merging of markets, though, great playing. Let's say when in jazz, when bebop develops. In the beginning, bebop is bebop is played extremely fast. Let's just put Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, Bird in our head for that, right? Because they're two goats in that. Pioneers, legends. They're playing at a speed that not just whites, but blacks aren't even catching up to. They're hip to it, and they've got to catch up to it because they're doing things nobody's doing. It's at a high speed, right? And I'm deliberately using bebop because the music is played fast too, so it puts everything fast in what we're talking about. But when they sell it, that becomes a niche. It's different than, let's say, what's popping already, the ragtime, the stuff that Duke Ellington was making, the genius of Duke Ellington, all that stuff is popping, right? So we have a speed of niche markets. When this happens, this speed, what happens is that those niche markets, when they start to be understood, when they start to be adapted to as far as like, okay, we're getting it now, it is being explained to us, right? And we're getting it, it becomes absorbed into it, right? It becomes absorbed into the culture. So the speed of commercialization is what happens. And the second part of that is not just the speed of the markets and the business, but also on how they market it, but also the speed of white playing. It takes whites a long time to learn how to do the culture. For jazz, though, it probably took about 30 to 40 years before you started to see consistent whites. The Dave Brubecks, the Bix Beiderbecks, the Stan Getzes, right? It took them a long time to develop those players, right? So the speed of commercialization is mind-blowingly fast by the time hip-hop comes. And so we have a music from the 70s, 80s that is high in lyrical content. No one does this ever before, have words spoken out in this way as a song, and yet it's the speed of commercialization is at a rapid pace. The speed of commercialization is so fast, though, that Eminem hit right at the right moment, right when they knew. And let's not kid ourselves. Dr. Dre was said to have exposed him, to found him. But what do you think gave him the know-how to go look for that? Because he's on Interscope. He's with Ivy. He's with all these bloodsuckers of the poor. They're telling him what to look for. Look for a fucking cracker that could rap. This is what we need. We need stuff like this. We need more niggitude, and we need more a possible cracker. We have all these markets that we could do, that we could explode this shit with. The speed of commercialization is so fast. It is so fast that once we understand it, we think we can use it, and we don't need to know about where it came from. Then there's the co-opting of forms and opinion platforms. I'm going to give you one example, and then keep it moving. When I was doing radio, college radio in the mid-90s, I started to see a trend, though, where all the radio stations that I went to, college radio stations that I went to, were helmed by whites. And I love legend, and they go from the unknowns at different universities all the way to 89.9. Because a Boricua was hosting Babito, Stretch and Babito. But that was still a white man that was deciding the music. And I make sure of this because whether they chose good music or not, the entire hip-hop underground that at that time was setting the trends that would graduate into a commercial mainstream, there actually was a legitimate graduation. Like a lot of the best artists would graduate into the mainstream. A lot of this was decided by whites only. So I used to have conversations with some of these DJs, and I give you an example about how the depth of our culture and our black history and black reality is not taken into account. I'd have arguments, though, about classics. I remember one argument I had about how Breaking Atoms is a much more important record than Brand Nubian's One for All. Large Professor is a necessary, absolutely necessary legend in hip hop. But those songs that he constructed there are not why he's a necessary legend only. But those songs in One for All, though, are absolutely necessary to the development of black conscious in hip hop. Absolutely. And I'm saying that from personal reality, personal experience. There's a difference. And this dismissal of progressive black ideas starts to wane and starts to be replaced by others. By 1997, when you see Woo Forever, the majority of outlets, including our people, are disavowing, are not really feeling the depth of challenging black ideas. And I remember I first started to see it, though, with the responses to Wu-Tang Forever. That was where you really started to see it, though. And it was being compared to a more commercial work, a more commercially diverse work, Biggie's Life After Death, right? Now, I don't need to tell you which one I thought was more important. So we have the Dark Ages roots in all of this. What I mean by dark ages, those 2000s, I call it dark ages because a big part of it was the roots in white biting and appropriation of techniques and content imagery extending itself bigger. And I'm gonna get into trouble here. Fuck it. Two great examples of that are Jedi Mind Tricks and R.A. the Rugged Man. R.A. the Rugged Man has a history of doing hip hop way before, but all of a sudden, after Big Pun dies, though, he's rhyming as fast as fucking possible. And nearly everybody in the underground, from Esoteric all the way to Vinnie Paz, though, they're all doing puns, tempos, and they're all doing his couplings. They're all doing it. The entire underground of white rappers and that white market is all doing it from the east to the west coast. Right? And the imagery itself. We don't need Kill Army anymore. We have Jedi Mind Tricks, so. Right? You can have people talk the knowledge itself without, when they decide to not be that, when they decide not to be that. Right? They could be the God on one verse, though, but then they could tell you, no, I'm Islamic. I deal with the religion of Islam. No, I'm a white guy, though, but I just call myself the God before. Come on, man. I'm here now. You know what I mean? That bullshit's out the window. I'm here. You know what I mean? But we also have the lack of exaltation, the lack of exalting the real innovators. The real innovators of that late 90s was not Eminem. The real innovators were of the next level of music was Pun. It was Lauryn Hill, right? And it was Mos Def. And if we skip a little bit more, we have Ghostface Killah. The trends that they started, the ideas that they started, the revolutionary ideas are what propelled the music. Eminem's getting all the credit, though. We also have a lack of attention, and this is also the media, especially a lack of attention during that time to the rising stars of tomorrow's innovation. And that was like Thurston Howell III. So when you were getting these corny ad-libs and all that stuff, the real innovator of that, as far as using comedy to tell a story of the people of the hood, was out there rhyming demos as albums, Thurston Howell III. And if you think he didn't link up with Eminem and that they didn't know each other and that Eminem wasn't around these people, think again. Think again. These are nice guys I'm talking about that. Great people. They're not here to tell you who bit off them. They're here to create new works. But I'm here to tell you that. That's what I do. And then we have, I'll tell you something. We only got a few minutes left, so this is going to be a two-parter, this fucking lecture. This has so much shit I got to go, but we're going to leave with this. One of the other reasons, the last of the major factors on the losing ownership, factors on losing ownership, is the lyrical standard. You know what I'm saying? the lyrical standard, right? Stylistically, all of the great personas of complete, you know, when we talk about, let's say, for example, since we're talking about Eminem, a persona of completely offensive comedic brilliance is Redman. His run from 1992 to 1999 is impeccable. It's impeccable comedy. It's some of the most offensive shit that you'll ever hear. You don't play Redman, you know, any old place. It's stylistically next level. It's technically as gifted as anyone that I've ever heard. And with the breath control, a mastery of techniques, there really isn't anything that he doesn't know how to do within the parameter and with the content parameters that he chose as having that brash, comedic, you know, rebellious persona. It's supreme. But then we also have the content, and I use Wu-Tang Forever as an example, right? Just look back at half of their interviews of the members between 1997 and 2000, and all they talked about was the roadblocks caused by the complexity of their lyricism. Some interviews even talked about how they had to make sure RZA didn't rhyme that much like he did before. Have him rhyme less. This is our fault. This isn't Eminem's fault. Eminem was just that unlike a track right at the right moment. This is our fault for not expecting something deeper. Something deeper when I gotta give the standard. Can I give the standard a little bit? Shit like this, when RZA said, niggas is caught up in the midst of six. You better grab a hold of your crucifix, and this is it, the black God exists. Can you understand this? Let me teach you a lesson. The pre-existence of the mathematical biochemical equations. That is, the manifestations of God, earth, air, fire, water, which are in its basic formation, solid liquids and gases that cause the land masses and the space catalyst, and all matter that exists and is dense. Third dimension that must be observed through physical comprehension. It takes a nerve to be struck. Wisdom is the wise poet, spoken to wake up the dumb who've been sleeping. The fourth dimension is time. It goes inside the mind, run the channels, energize up through the back of your spine. So observe as my chi energy strikes a vital nerve. One swerve of the tongue and pierces like a sword through the lung. Have you not heard that words kill as fast as bullets when you load negative thoughts to the chamber of your brain and your mouth pulls the trigger that propels wickedness straight from hell? From the pit of your stomach is where negativity dwells. This kind of content was unacceptable. Unacceptable. We weren't really into it. So as I leave you, on the second part of this appropriation lecture, I'm going to go through how this complacency developed. I'm going to go into today's lyricism, what I call the liberal arts, and I'll tell you why I call it the liberal arts, right? And I'm also going to go through some of the other aspects, and we're going to go deep into Eminem as an MC, why he's not even close to being GOAT, the formats, the ideas, the obstruction of justice that his reality as an MC entails, and we're going to go through his white privilege and applying those ideas into a little in-depth review of that Kamikaze album. So look forward to that. I look forward to building on that. And until the next time, this is your brother SUNEZ. And there'll be a lot more stories to tell, writings to recite, and records to rewind and reminisce. For now, I'm your host, SUNEZ, and as always, the Power Right Show is a never respect fake broadcast. Peace.